Ты что? Я просто не знаю, что делать в этом.
Не, вот поездки на конференцию. Вот тоже трансляцию делают. Настя, Настя. Наша
Поярче нельзя.
Вообще свет поярче. Сейчас на презентации я чуть-чуть еще темнее.
Еще темнее. В принципе, так-то видно. Просто для съемки. Угу. Да. Угу. Да, спасибо. Угу. Просто на общем плане монитором все равно ярче, чем общий зал. А если выровнять? А людей снимать вообще в темноте сейчас. Угу. Спасибо. Вроде нормально, пока-то. Хорошо.
Лучше процент.
Ну да, ну там... Нет, наверное, вот это. Какая минута? И вот это.
Ближе или дальше? То есть Маша, ну давай здесь. Привет. Нет. Ну ладно. Передайте? Нет. Да, ну все равно там размечу, ничего задерживать. 3 часа начала.
переводчиком слышно? Помашите ручками. Ага, спасибо, отлично. Вы можете что-нибудь сказать в наушники? Отлично. Прекрасно слышно. Отлично, спасибо.
Еще раз, дорогие друзья, вот просьба, когда вы будете задавать вопросы только подходя к микрофону, чтобы и услышал и переводчик, и, соответственно, чтобы это было слышно всем. Хорошо?
Если мы говорим наполовину по-этически, то какой часть сверху расписывать, почему? Запиши, пока не забыла. Прошу поторопиться.
Добрый вечер, дорогие друзья. Спасибо, что пришли. Сегодня у нас замечательное событие. У нас докладчиком выступает Джеймс Уотсон. Нет нужды представлять Джеймса Уотсона аудитории. Ну, прежде всего, потому что все знают, что именно он является одним из первооткрывателей, значит, структуры ДНК, которая фактически это открытие определило ход вообще всей дальнейшей биологии. Сейчас, секундочку. Jim, I think, Андрей, наушники просто воткнуть в канал, чтобы можно было слушать вперед. И что мне особенно приятно, что данный визит Джеймса Уотсона в Россию – это визит ученого на научную конференцию. То есть надо понимать, что Джеймс Уотсон продолжает активно заниматься наукой, он продолжает развивать несколько важных направлений в биологии, в основном, ну, в первую очередь в лаборатории Колл-Спринг-Харбор, где он занимает должность почетного профессора, ну, что такое. И одна из этих областей – это редокс-биология. Ну, чтобы было понятно, это примерно наука, которая занимается изучением того, как электроны движутся, как потоки электронов движутся в клетке, в живых системах, как они распределяются, что бывает, если все хорошо, что бывает, если они отклоняются от своих нормальных путей. И эта наука, редокс-биология, она имеет очень большие, большие связи с нейродегенеративными заболеваниями, с онкологическими заболеваниями и так далее. И Джеймс Уотсон является активным ученым в данной области, и мы, в общем, пригласили его в качестве докладчика на конференцию по редокс-биологии европейской, которая будет проходить на следующей неделе в России. То есть не просто этот человек сделал такой значительный вклад, как открытие структуры ДНК, а он продолжает делать, развивать различные направления науки. Ну и мне, как редокс-биологу, собственно, особенно приятно, что он тем самым привлекает внимание к нашей дисциплине, тем, что она интересует его. Значит, я должен сказать, я не буду отнимать у вас много времени. Значит, визит Джеймса Уотсона состоялся, он бы, наверное, в любом случае состоялся, но сделать его удобным для Джеймса Уотсона, а также доступным для всех желающих его послушать, в частности, вот эта лекция, которая сегодня происходит, она бы не состоялась без очень значительной и очень своевременной помощи фонда Алишера Усманова «Искусство, наука и спорт», а также без помощи наших партнеров компании DAM, которая, собственно, занимается в России дистрибуцией различных совершенно реагентов для молекулярной биологии, приборов и так далее. То есть спасибо им большое, потому что именно благодаря их вкладу в итоге получилось так, что Джеймс Уотсон приехал заранее, читает лекции в Москве, в Санкт-Петербурге. Сейчас я передам микрофон Александру Габибовичу Габибову, академику Российской академии наук, директору нашего института, и он также скажет приветственные слова. Александр Габибович.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. When I was a student, I can't imagine that I will chair a lecture of Professor Watson, because I spent half of my life in the Institute of Molecular Biology, Engelgard Institute. At that time, Engelgard was the director of our institute, and Jim visited us many times. Even I have some photos when I was much younger, when I was a student, postgraduate student with Jim. And my friend Grisha Nikolopov joined his institute, his lab. He was my very close friend, and I'm very glad that he shared his time. He spent some time now in Russia. So really, it's very nice and very good that we may welcome Jim here, because it's our great privilege. Certainly, his input in molecular biology is tremendous, and may say that it's a starting point, a turning point of molecular biology. It's not my field. My DNA, I was involved in DNA. I discovered the DNA's activity of antibody. This is my only one input in molecular biology. I'm a student. I was a student of Professor Braunstein, who also was one of the friends of Jim, and he shared his hospitality with Professor Engelgard when Jim Watson visited us. So I may say that Engelgard Institute, at that time Institute of Molecular Biology of Russia, of Soviet Academy of Science, was one of the privileged spots to welcome Jim Watson. And I don't want to say so much about politics, but it was a very hot time. It was a Cold War, and at that time Jim visited us without any hesitation, and he gave lectures, and he had discussions with professors, with students, and it was very stimulating discussions during this time in 70s, in early 80s. So I'm very glad that Jim is still working, still active in the Hot Spring Harbor. Hot Spring Harbor Laboratory is one of the key points. A very nice, very good also institute. And I think that this visit will be, as previous visit, will be very beneficial for youngsters. Young students and postgraduate students and young researchers may put some new news about redox biology. And so I'm very glad to open this lecture, which will be absolutely interesting, and I expect that it will be fantastic. Thank you very much, Jim.
So this afternoon I'm going to sort of give a historical talk going through the various sort of decades of my life. And then at the end I'll say what I'm trying to do scientifically. But I was 12 years younger than Francis Crick. He died 14 years ago, and Francis and I were sort of different. Francis liked to think and talk. I think for the most part I like to write. So I've spent much of my life writing books, and now I just finished a sort of small article. So I'm still trying to be a scientist. I'm now 89 years old. At this stage, I'm grateful for every additional year of being able to be a scientist. And I still think largely in the future. I don't think back on myself as a historical figure, but this afternoon I'll treat myself as historical. So if I can... Yes, so my title is, I've been very lucky that from the essentially age of 19, I've been with very exciting people. So I've been with sort of the best minds in the fields I've been interested for now 70 years. And now I'm not bored, but it's really because I'm trying to move a little out of DNA toward chemistry. And most of my world is just DNA sequencing. And that's the big thing in the United States, but I think the solution to the problem I've been interested in for almost 70 years, how to cure cancer, will come from chemistry, not genetics. And so I like being here among the environment of chemistry. Now, I didn't come out of a scientific background. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, to what we'd call a middle-class family. My mother's side, they were Irish Americans, and on my father's side, we were sort of Midwestern frontier people. So I never viewed myself as coming from any place except Chicago, which then was quite independent of New York City. And my mother went for 2 years to the University of Chicago, and then her money ran out. My father had only 1 year of college, and then his father lost all their money. So he had just 1 year of college, but in particular, my father, both my parents read books. And we were raised in the heart of the Depression. I was born in '28. The Depression really hit about 1932, and at that time we were going toward 30% of all Americans were out of work. So it was a very tough time. Fortunately, my father never lost his job. And so there was always food. I never worried about a meal, but we had no automobile. So my father, to go to work, had to spend roughly almost an hour on the streetcar going to work and an hour coming back. And that was better than driving a car because he could read books. And so our house, the only luxury in our house was books. And I became, let's see, yeah, that's a picture of me as, you know, I don't know, maybe 10 years old, and I have some sort of rules. I wrote a book, Avoid Boring People, and I have rules, and my first rule was don't fight bigger boys or fight dogs. It sounds like you never win. And so I never liked to do anything where I couldn't win. And so I was a small boy, and so when I played with balls, I would put spin on balls. So I was a pitcher who could spin on. And then maybe the third thing, which made me not very popular, but I would never accept a dare to put my life at risk. So I didn't take any chances with my life. And whereas other boys would be more daring. And then, very important, only accept advice that comes from experience, from knowledge. No revelation. So no religion. So really as early as I could think, I basically rejected religion. So my mother was an Irish Catholic, so I went to Catholic church until I was 11, and then I stopped. But I never really believed anything they said to me. So, then another thing which I got from my parents is avoid hypocrisy. Never say things you don't believe in order to please people. Best just say the truth or say nothing. So I was right enough to say nothing most of the time to other people. So I wasn't, you know, a social person because I didn't want to say something I didn't believe. And my parents never said anything they didn't believe. So it was family. And then the last thing was, I never thought I was that bright, so I constantly needed help. So if you need help, get it quickly. Don't try and do things you don't know how to do. Just get help. So my whole life has been get help as fast as possible when you need it. Don't try and prove to people you can do everything. The main thing is to get the job done, not who does it. And so those were sort of, so I was brought up to be sort of sensible and dull and not fail. And then so that was my first decade. My father, relaxation, he liked to watch birds. And he picked this up when he was still in secondary school. And he went to the college one year because they had a course on birds. But he, particularly in the spring when the birds would migrate from the south, I would go out with my father, and early on I learned about the great mystery of bird migration. How did they go so far, and sometimes to islands? So it was a great mystery. And so it was the first mystery I wanted to solve. So I sort of went beyond my father, who just wanted to watch birds, but I wanted to understand them. And so I went to a secondary school for 2 years, and it was a good school, and I was a good student, but I was never an outstanding student. There were some things I couldn't do well, and but I really liked reading books. So I'm getting maybe by the age of 12, my father would take me to a public library. It was about a mile away, and we'd walk to it. And then I'd come back with several books that I would read during the time. So I tended to have sort of general knowledge, and my family was political. My father, from as early as I remember him, was worried about Hitler. And we lived in the Midwest when people had sort of thought the First World War was a waste of America's efforts and didn't want to go to war again. But my father wanted to go to war because he saw Hitler was bad, and what he disliked about Hitler was Hitler's hatred of the Jewish people. So my father really liked the Jewish people because he liked people who read books and wrote books. And so I've always grown up to hate people who hate Jews. So I'm not a, you could say, Christian. I really hate bad people. So I don't love my enemies. And early on, our life was dominated by the horrors of the Great Depression and the horrors of Hitler. And so when war came to us in '41, we were obviously on the side of Russia. And of course, Russia was then defending itself first in Stalingrad and then finally defeated Germany with their aid. And I was very lucky that there was a program at the University of Chicago which took 2 years. It let you go to college when you were only 2 years of high school. And so I went to college, university, when I was just 15. We had an education not of textbooks, but we read the great books of Western civilizations, which would include War and Peace and Dostoevsky. And so I was trained to read books and to try and have ideas. So the main thing, let's see, I'll go on to, and that shows me, before I got to the university, I was on a quiz show on the radio, and I was on 3 times, but there were some kids who were on 100 times. They answered all the questions, but I was not a very amusing child. And, but I used the money when the war ended to buy bird binoculars. We had no money for anything like that, but there were a couple of boys I was friendly with, but I wasn't really close to other kids. I was really close to my family, and I was always closest to books. And this shows me just when I went to the University of, a picture of me, and I entered in '43 and graduated from the university when I was 19. Now, this turned out to be very important that I skipped 3 years, because if I hadn't skipped 3 years, someone else would have found the structure of DNA. So I was just born and educated at just the right time. If I'd been born 3 years before, there wouldn't have been DNA as a problem. If I'd been born afterwards, someone else would have solved it. So in that sense, I was very lucky, and at that time, the University of Chicago was probably the best university in the United States. So I'm a product of a very good education, just like you would get here at Moscow State. I really had the best. And we show, and then I intended to, that shows me, you know, as a bird watcher, and some rules. And so the University of Chicago was a place where you learned primarily to think. You didn't learn facts, but you learned how to deal with facts. And the main thing was to have an idea. And I worried I'd never have an idea, because I really never had an idea in university. You know, all I got was thinking with pre-existing ideas. And, a very important thing is, you know, an idea is more important than a fact. So I'm pleased that this little paper I've just read, I have 4 new ideas. Or the ideas that other people haven't written. They're so simple that I think lots of people would have them, but nonetheless, no one has really emphasized, you know, why something happens. You learn what happens, but you want to know why it happens. Okay. So why is always the question to ask. And to start with, you want to think like your teachers. And it doesn't pay to sort of fight your teachers. You know, just try and take courses where you like your teachers, accept what they say. And then, you know, seek out bright friends instead of being popular. You know, in the whole time in university, I had 1 date with a girl, and it was arranged. So basically, I never talked to a girl during university. And I had nothing to say to them. And so You know, and then it's important to actually have teachers who like you. So you shouldn't go through university without knowing your teachers, in some sense, because your teachers will tell you, give you help as to your future. And so I got enormous help when I wanted to go on from my, to get a PhD, that I wanted to go to Caltech, because it was great in chemistry, and by then I had wanted to move on from birds toward the gene, and but then there was the question, you should have a second choice. And so I was told to apply to Indiana University. Now, Indiana University did not have a high reputation except for basketball. Indiana was very good in basketball, and I much enjoyed when I was in Indiana going to basketball games. But it wasn't known. But what I didn't know at the time, it was probably the best place in the United States, if not the world, for genetics. Even though Caltech was supposed to be better, Indiana was very good. So when Caltech turned me down because I didn't look like I know any chemistry, Indiana accepted me because they didn't get any applicants from bright students. And so I had come from a good school. So I got a scholarship to go to Indiana, as well as I had a scholarship to Chicago. So my parents never had to pay any money except the train fares to get me to school. So, and this was the book that changed my life. It came in my third year at the University of Chicago. It was called What is Life? And of course, in religious people, life came from God, but if there was no God, what was life? And the great idea we had then was Charles Darwin's evolution. And, how did it start? And I learned the traditional things about the gene, but no one really talked about how the gene worked. And the great physicist Schrödinger, who was from Austria but had fled Austria to escape from Hitler, though he wasn't Jewish, he ended up in Ireland during the war and had to give some lectures, and gave them on what is life, because he had been excited by reading a paper by the young German physicist Delbruck and the Russian geneticist who was then working in Berlin, Timofeyev Ruzavsky. And so it was Timofeyev who was really the idea person, and Delbruck was really a product of Timofeyev. And then I became a product of Delbruck. But the thing was reading the book, and it raised the problem, how do you copy the information? And then you had to know what is the language of DNA. And there was, DNA, nucleic acids, but no one could say anything interesting about it. But I just thought the gene is a more important problem than bird migration. So, and I, of course, wanted to understand what life was and where it could come from. But the key thing had to be information, and no one had really said it like Schrödinger said it. And so I was reading the book, and I read the book because of I learned about the book not from a teacher, but from reading our local newspaper. Just said this is an interesting book, and I read it. And so it changed my life. And so this period from, I went to Indiana in the fall of '47, left there in 1950, but the sort of third decade of my life was one where it sort of started with me becoming a scientist. And it was interesting that I knew enough that the summer of 1948 sort of started me as a real scientist. I went to Cold Spring Harbor, met Delbruck, met the famed physicist Leo Szilard, who was Fermi, had done the first nuclear pile, but we got interested in biology. And they treated me as an equal. And everyone was sort of an equal at Cold Spring Harbor. There was no hierarchy, which was, I think I knew enough so that no one had treated me as very bright until I was 20, and then suddenly people treated me as if I was their equal. So that was very good for my morale. And so, you know, I wasn't a boy genius, but when I got among scientists, I was treated as an equal. And that was very important, and they didn't know how to think about the gene. And because Delbruck had decided that we would understand viruses. And the key component of viruses was their nucleic acid component. But people hadn't really proven that yet. And so anyways, this was, this decade was one where, you know, I went from being no one to having the structure of DNA. And that's next to my sister, who was, she wanted to be popular. She was almost popular, but she then married a very bright man. So she was infected by the need to be near intelligence. And that was very helpful. And then in a slide there's my hero Delbruck, and so Delbruck was sort of my, you know, model really because of the What is Life book. Let's see. Yeah, and that just shows me in Indiana in probably my second year. And very important for me, I was a very short boy, but I grew to be 6'2". So I was tall. And somehow that matters to men. And then just, first thing, you know, choose a young thesis advisor, do something new. Don't sort of do details from the past that haven't been worked out, but just go for something new. And I initially did research that my supervisor, who was Italian MD Luria, he was a friend of Delbruck, that's why I wanted to work for him. And I really enjoyed Indiana. And then what did I do next? So I thought, I've done viruses, I have to learn chemistry. So they said, well, go to Copenhagen because that's where the great physics had been done in the 20s. Delbruck was there. And he talked about the great people he met there, Gamow and Landau, and Copenhagen was really the center of the world at that time. When I got there, it wasn't. But Niels Bohr was still alive, and he invited me to his house twice, and so I had a good time. But the next, and there's my supervisor, and then I did meet, you know, Leo Szilard, who was he was very important because he's probably the brightest person I ever met. And he would think 3 or 4 steps ahead. He wouldn't just say before, something had to be before that, but he would really, or he could think ahead a lot. And when he had the idea for a nuclear reaction, a chain reaction, that was in 1933. He immediately went and patented it in secret. He was then in England. So he was worried about nuclear weapons in 1933. Probably the first person in the world to be worried about it. And so I was very pleased when he liked me. But Szilard had the quality which that most people disliked him. And you shouldn't avoid people because most people disliked them. Because most people disliked him because he was just brighter than they were. So he was, constantly saying the wrong thing. Because he was trying to be ahead of people. And General Groves thought he was a spy, so he never got into Los Alamos. But I stayed friends to him till he died. And then Delbert told me just to go for gold. That was a very important conversation. I proposed a dull experiment. He said, just do something important. And there was that summer of 1949, when I was 21 years old, I decided I'd go for DNA. And so I went to Copenhagen to sort of do biochemistry of DNA, but it turned out that they weren't doing the biochemistry, so I did a conventional, and there shows me a picture with Niels Bohr. And then my life changed. While in Copenhagen, which was a very unpleasant city during the winter, just rain. And so I had the opportunity to go to Naples, and I went to Naples, and suddenly there was a meeting, and I saw that picture. And that said to me there was a three-dimensional structured DNA. So I thought the only important thing is to find out the structure of DNA. So the picture had been taken in London by Morris Wilkins. So I asked him, could I join your lab? And he said, no, basically no. So what did I do when I couldn't go near the DNA? So I wrote back to Luria, my thesis advisor, and he met a chemist from Cambridge University, John Kendall. So I went to Cambridge University in the fall of 1951. So I'd been 1 year in Europe, then I moved to Cambridge, and there's Cambridge, and then I met Francis Crick. I'd never heard of Francis Crick before I went there, but almost as soon as I got there, they said, you like meeting Francis Crick. Because Francis was interested in everything important, and they saw me as someone who just wanted to find the structure of the gene. I wasn't interested in proteins. And the boss was a very famous man who started crystallography, Sir Lawrence Bragg. And at that time, Lawrence Bragg just did everything possible to avoid hearing Crick's voice. Francis Crick had a very loud voice, and Bragg did not ever want to hear the voice because Francis had made the mistake of criticizing Bragg. So it's not a good idea to criticize in public the person who determines your fate. So they told Francis he had to leave, but he was working on a PhD. He never got a PhD, it was during the war. And Francis at that time was sort of a failure. Except during the war, he never got a first-class degree because he never really did what people told him to do. And so never went to Oxford or Cambridge, was in London. And in London, working on an incredibly unimportant PhD thesis. And the war came and a bomb destroyed the building he was working on. By that time he was working on the Admiralty. And then in the Admiralty he proved that he was very, very bright. And he had a very important idea, and it sunk about 125 German subchases. So Francis was useful, and then after the war they fired him. Because he made people uncomfortable. He was like Szilard in that sense. He would criticize people. And, but he was saved by someone who had known what he'd done during the war, who said, we'll give you 2 years at Cambridge. So he went to Cambridge and for 2 years totally wasted his time by doing a very dull experiment of measuring the viscosity of a cell, a meaningless objective. He had tiny magnets inside cells and would try and measure the viscosity. But luckily, he was spotted by a small group of people who wanted to work out the structure of proteins. And they realized Francis could be their theoretician. He would think for them. So Francis was given a job as a thinker. And that's about when I arrived. And so I immediately said, I want to find the structure of DNA. And Francis knew that DNA was more important than protein, but there was no one he, could share that idea with. So he was stuck working on proteins until I arrived. And that was sort of the DNA backbone. And so we built a model, and it was just awful. It was 3 chains. Francis one that said he'd done something important. We hadn't done anything. We'd done something really pretty stupid. And so it turned out that the people in London really thought DNA was their problem, and so the people in Cambridge, Bragg, and the others, they said, Cambridge, we will work on proteins, DNA is for London. Okay. Well, the trouble with that was that DNA is more important than protein. So you let someone else work on the important problem and you work on something else. So that was my thing, but I went along because we really didn't have an idea. And so we didn't know how to do anything now, but, and then we learned that there was a woman who had been given the DNA problem. Women didn't even have it. Her name was Rosalind Franklin, and she was difficult. That's the only word that most people found it hard to talk to her. That's all. She was strong-minded, intelligent, and unpleasant. But she had DNA. By an accident. It's all in my book, The Double Case. Afterwards, I learned that Rosalind wasn't so unpleasant. I spent a lot of time with her afterwards. So, but when I was there, she was the, she was a person who had the DNA, and she wouldn't talk, didn't want to talk to me, or she didn't really want to talk to anyone else. She really made the mistake of wanting to do it by herself, and I come back to that. The important thing is to solve a problem fast, not do it yourself. And so it's important to get help. And she went to Oxford to get help and totally blew it, absolutely blew it. She went there with some question to answer, and then they realized she didn't really know what she was talking about, and they told her basically to go back and learn your textbook. She didn't like that. Anyways, that was great luck for me with time, because she never solved the problem. And there she is. I didn't know it at the time. She came from a really rich family, very rich, banking. And she had a good education. And so all I could do in Cambridge was to grow my hair. You know, I arrived with a short American haircut, and then people laughed at it, and so I didn't cut my hair for a year, and you can see what I look like. And but Rosalind, fortunately, didn't want DNA to be a helix. And and so she sent out this notice, party, celebrating the death of the helix. This was after, and this shows me at the time, back with a sort of virus group, Double's in the picture. Everyone's in this picture. It was in Paris in an abbey or Roymont, where there was a meeting in the summer of 1952. And there, after that meeting, I went into the Italian Alps and had a wonderful time. And I cut my hair low. Oh, and there's the man that we thought he can really solve it, Linus Pauling. And he's the world's greatest chemist. He did the alpha helix of proteins. He's certainly bound to want to do DNA. We just thought he was going to try and do DNA. And so, actually, that summer he was competing with Crick over the fact that the alpha helices call around each other, something called a coil. And we think Linus stole one of Crick's ideas, but we're not sure. Anyway, Linus showed up, Francis told him what he was doing, and then Linus went back and wrote a paper which was just what Crick was doing. So, you know, Linus was very great, but he wanted to be first on everything. And was a charming man, but not very generous to competitors. Not at all generous. But then he came out and published a structure. What we were fearing, his son was, he sent his son to be in Cambridge, because Cambridge was a good place. And then one day Peter said, Pop has a structure for DNA. And then I was worried, well, how can he have the structure when he doesn't have the data which they have in London? But he nonetheless went and proposed a structure which, fortunately, all it took me is for 1 minute to realize that he was wrong. And this was a bird watcher that said Linus was wrong. So Linus had made a very fundamental mistake which we'll never understand. He was just absolutely, he made hydrogen bonds out of phosphate groups. That structure should be low powered. It could exist at pH 1, but not at pH 7. And Linus had proposed it. So we read the paper and just didn't understand how the world's greatest chemist, and most people thought he's the world's greatest chemist, could make a mistake. And so I took the paper into London and tried to show it to Rosalind Franklin. I said, Linus has made a mistake. And she says, of course he made a mistake. DNA is not a helix. And I just said, well, it is a helix. So she basically threw me out of her office because I said DNA was a helix. But it meant that she wasn't thinking about the problem. Linus had assumed everything he did was right. So he wasn't worried about his structure, but Crick and I knew it was wrong. And then we saw Rosalind's X-ray picture. And for 8 months, it said it was a helix. And she didn't talk to anyone. You know, I'd come back, talk about your data to people, get people to criticize you who should be criticized. But she didn't like that. And Linus, of course, wouldn't talk to anyone because he just assumed he was God, so you don't criticize God. So we were very lucky. I mean, you know, we didn't deserve to be this lucky. Anyways, that was the famed photograph. There's Francis and I. And the day after, 2 days after he told me that I had the wrong form, I had the base pairs. It was a Saturday morning. It was about 10 in the morning. I put them together, saw AT and GC had similar. Francis came in and saw that the chains had to run in opposite directions from base pair. We knew we saw the structure of DNA. So we went from nowhere to having the answer, and we knew we had the answer. It was just because there was a complementary relationship between the chains. One chain told you the structure of the other. So replication, all it had to involve was separate the chains and you had the information to build the other chain. So we immediately knew we had done something very important. And so we went to lunch, and So, and so when I wrote the book, The Double Helix, of course I forgot what all I knew is that before lunch we had solved the structure. But I wrote it up, and then I have Francis winging into the eagle saying we had solved the structure of life. Now, I didn't remember it at all, but it would have been very unusual for Francis not to say we had done something important. So it sounded right, and it's the most famous line in my book, but I made it up. But anyways, that's the structure. You all see it, and we wrote the paper, and we solved the structure on 28th of February 1953. It was published in Nature about 2 months later. And the article was submitted by Bragg. It was never refereed in any conventional sense. It was just came out. And it was just a short article because the people from London published 2 articles which just showed their data. And Francis spent the next 3 months just saying, bringing people in to see the model. We built a model. First it was just 2 bass pairs, then, built a model. And so I really couldn't stand being in the room listening to Francis saying how important it was. And so Francis knew I was, so he said, Jim, you do not understand how important the work we've done. Of course I understood. But Francis just didn't realize that in Cambridge, Cambridge England is understatement. Whereas Crick was overstatement. If he could, had something to overstate, he would overstate it. And in a sense, he was right. In any case, this shows you the results. We get the, Nobel Prize. I get a job at Harvard, and I begin to have my first students. And from 58, that's when we really, that decade of my life, I was now 30. And between 30 and 40, the genetic code got solved. And I took a job at Cold Spring Harbor because I wanted to move on after the code to work on what cancer was and how viruses could cause cancer. So I left Harvard, but at Harvard I had some really great students. But then in '61, we went to, there was the famed Biochemical Congress in Moscow. We stayed at the Ukrainian Hotel. There was a session in the Kremlin, and then I guess we were out at the university for much of it. And there was an unexpected great discovery. Marshall Nirenberg suddenly said PolyU codes for polyphenol. So it was the first letter of genetic code that was revealed at that meeting. So the meeting is a very famous one. And there's actually a picture of the famed Timofeyev, who was sort of exiled out doing natural history. But you can see Crick there, and it was a wonderful meeting. And then Engelhardt, Lysenko was still alive. I was taken to a restaurant and actually saw the Lysenko. And you can't in any way overstate his ego. He was just beyond awfulness. And then the physicists gave support, and actually there was some decent molecular biology done in physics first. So the first real molecular biology was done under the patronage of Tam. He was a very great man. And you just see that. And then the next sort of big event was I decided I'd write up how we found the structure of DNA, so I wrote the double helix. It was originally going to be called Honest Jim. And because there had been two famous books before Honest Jim. One was Conrad's Great Lord Jim, then there was Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis, and I thought, why not Honest Jim? And I had the perfect first sentence, I've never seen Francis in a modest mood, which everyone agreed with. The one thing Crick lacked was any modesty, except when he bought a boat and then didn't know how to sail, so he was modest on his boat. But anyways, that was, I finished the book in 66. It took about 2 years to come out. Francis first didn't object, then objected, but and Harvard Press was going to publish it, but they said they wouldn't publish it if there was a fight between scientists, so it was published by a new publishing firm called Athenaeum, but it turned out all very well. And there were a few bad reviews of the book, but everyone loved the book because it made science fun. And of course, working with Francis Crick was great fun. And then my job, and then I got married when I was 39, and I married a student at Harvard, but she wasn't a student of biology, she was in the front row. I tell everyone there were two important things. She was very pretty, and then she liked me. And most of my time, I liked girls, but they didn't like me. But, you know, the important thing is marrying someone who likes you. And so we've been together now more than 49 years. So very successful. And Cold Spring Harbor was first where, you know, I became a scientist, and it was a place where people were honest, and you could say unpleasant things at Cold Spring Harbor. And you weren't penalized for telling the truth. Now that America, you're penalized for telling the truth, so it's not a perfect place anymore. But anyways, during my time, it was a wonderful place, and we got back to Russia in '85, and then I'm giving a talk, and the Institute of Molecular Biology, Georgiev, Spirin was out in Pushkino, but this is the Moscow group, and people from Moscow began coming to Cold Spring Harbor, and that's the Engelhardt Institute. Engelhardt was the great person who brought molecular biology to Russia. And so it was a great trip. And then with time, the very talented chemist Mirza Bekov, he came to Harvard and told Wally Gilbert how to sequence DNA. So it was a very important visit that Andre gave the idea that Wally gave Wally a Nobel Prize, but of course Wally had to put it into practice. And Wally Gilbert was a theoretical physicist who moved to my lab when we discovered messenger RNA and moved into biology. And even though he was a theorist, he was, in biology, he did experiments. And so having Wally around, I've always been surrounded by people who I consider brighter than myself. So it's good when you ask questions to people who are brighter. You have a chance of getting an answer. And the next thing which came up and was after the code, the big thing was recombinant DNA, and there the big battle was people wanted to regulate it. And fortunately, after a couple of years, there was an awful meeting in California when the scientific community voted to regulate themselves, and I was against regulation, but I was 3 out of 100. Lindenberg and Stanley Cohen. But everyone else was, and I thought, you can't regulate the frontier. And that's something you've got to know. The frontier, you just don't know. People die at frontiers. So now we have a new frontier, CRISPR. Should we genetically engineer humans? I'd say no regulation, let them go ahead. And if you get some mistakes, you stop. But you can't, if you regulate, you won't do anything, if you want to be cautious. So I just urge you that if the Americans regulate, no regulators until you know what the frontier is. The truth is the frontier has to be found out, and then you can go ahead and maybe you have to have regulation. But don't regulate at the beginning. Regulate after something goes wrong, not before anything goes wrong. But now America is, you know, America is fucked up. Yeah. And so, oh, that's fine. Anyways, I've been back to Moscow. This is now my 9th visit to Moscow. And the big thing was doing the Human Genome Project. I guess I was the only person willing to really, you know, start it at the beginning, and I did. And then I got fired after 4 years. But generally I've been fired a number of times. And I think if you have a career, you want to be at the frontier, you're going to be fired because you upset someone. And so I still upset people. It doesn't mean my life is better off because I've upset them, but I mean, the woman who fired me from being head of the genome, oh, she was just a mess. But she was in power and she fired me. And I was lucky because I really I wasn't the person to run the Human Genome Project. It should be run by someone who's a chemist. Human Genome Project was chemistry, not biology. Okay. And so now I'm trying to cure cancer, and the answer is, and that's why I'm here for meeting on redox biology, that the things that keep you from curing cancer is antioxidants, and the way you kill cancer cells is by oxidants. But you know, conventional wisdom is that antioxidants make you healthy. But if you take enough of them, it'll give you cancer. So you don't want to take them, and so I think we're going to win. And so I think I've talked enough. And I'm going about 15 minutes, but my life has stayed interesting because I tried to stay at the frontier. And it means right now, you know, almost the whole cancer world of the UK and the United States is sequencing cancer cells, cancer DNA. And it will never tell you how to cure it. That's all. And so you've got to be prepared to be alone at the frontier. Now I can look back actually at a respected ancestor of mine, Benjamin Watson. He was on the gold rush. So I had a direct ancestor, went to California in 1849, became a shopkeeper to the miners, came back with some gold and built a big hotel. So anyways, if you want to have an exciting life, go at the frontier, and I've been lucky. I've been at the frontier for 70 years. And you know, I can't say anymore, but you have the opportunity here in Moscow of leading the world with redox biology, and so I did meet Ochinnikov once. I was taken into his gigantic office, and he was an impressive man. But I think you have an opportunity finally to do the impressive chemistry that will change the world. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jim, for a very inspiring talk. We now have a few minutes break before the questions. So whoever have a question, get yourself prepared, and we will start in a moment.
Дорогие коллеги, если можно, да, подходим к микрофону, 2 микрофона стоит в проходе и один вот сейчас 10% будет стоять. И задаем вопрос в микрофон.
Okay, I think now we can start with the questions. Пожалуйста. Если можно, прошу, когда вы задаете вопрос, коротко представиться и быть как бы ясным и кратким. Спасибо.
Студент 3-го курса биологического факультета МГУ Закиров Памир. И я хочу задать вам следующий вопрос. Некоторые ученые в своих выступлениях используют выражение «двойная спираль» для обозначения будущих открытий, которые сильно улучшат наш уровень понимания того или иного явления. В каких областях биологии, по вашему мнению, нам предстоит открыть двойные спирали в ближайшие полвека? Спасибо.
I can hear you.
Once again?
Yes, repeat the.
Некоторые ученые в своих выступлениях используют выражение «двойная спираль» для обозначения будущих открытий, которые сильно улучшат наш уровень понимания того или иного явления. Переводчик успевает? В каких областях биологии, по вашему мнению, нам предстоит открыть двойные спирали в ближайшие полвека?
Well, we can go in 2 directions. I've gone in directions of disease caused by mutations in DNA. So cancer is caused by mutations in DNA, and so we spent a long time finding cancer genes and tumor suppressor genes, and so we sort of know what cancer is caused by. The other thing is, just to move to the brain. And I think everyone I know thinks, how we store information in the brain, we have no idea. So it's as if we don't have any DNA to think in terms of. In genetics we had DNA. The brain we have the nerve cell, but the nerve cell, and we know how it is connected, but we really don't know how the information is stored. And there aren't really many people trying to think about it because I think it's a very difficult problem. And so I know only one person who says he has one person to talk to, and then some people in Germany. So it's a real field ready to be developed. And so in the meanwhile, one's trying to, learn more about nerve cells and how they work. And that's what people are doing. And so neuroscience, how long will it be before we, find the equivalent of the double helix? No one knows. It could be, tomorrow someone could have an idea. It might be 50 years from now. But it's a big problem. Then we have problems like all the neurodegenerative diseases. And diabetes we don't understand down the line. So in medicine, the only we've had two successes, in infectious diseases with antibiotics and heart surgery. And I had a heart operation. I didn't have a heart attack, but they repaired my heart 3 years ago, and maybe I have another 10 years on my heart. So I hope so. But I mean, I'm not sure I really want to be 100 years old. I'd like to be because I think it's going to be an exciting time to live as a scientist. But, I don't want to be alive and sick. And I can still play pretty good tennis in 89. I have good knees. My hips are right. And so I play with pros, so it's fun. But I'm afraid, I may have only 6 months more of real tennis. But as long as I can be in a world where people are bright, like this audience is filled with bright people, then I'm happy. At home, they sort of want to get rid of me because I'm unpleasant. I criticize people. And, but I've been criticizing people since, first in private, until I got to be 20, then I could begin to criticize people in public. And that started my life as an adult, when you're able to say the truth. And so the United States has become, not correct. We're politically correct, which means we're dishonest. And so we're in deep trouble. And even in England, it's pretty bad. Friend Tim Hunt, they fired him from things in London because he made a joke about women. You're not supposed to joke about, women. But, so it's a hard time to be a man in the United States. No, I'm just saying the truth. And, but, I've always tried to get bright women in the labs I've been connected with. I still am, so I don't want to be in a society only of men. But I'm just saying that somehow we've overreacted in the United States. And the essence of, a good life is having fun. And some people just don't want, I won't say any more. Everything I say gets me in trouble with them. And, but it's had the good advantage that I've had to be a scientist again. So for the last 10 years of my life, I've worried about science, not about, you know, being boss or anything like that. So I'm not a boss anymore, just far from being a boss. And so no one works for me, and I guess I wish I still had a lab. But when I ran an institute, I thought, as long as I can write books. So I was kept sane by not having a lab, but I wrote books. And the last book I wrote about was my father, because if people want to understand me, they have to understand where I came from. And I'm proud of where I came from. I came from good people. And my wife came from good people. So we're used to coming from good people. That's, you know, that's a lot of life. But I think when you get at the frontiers are, you know, no one knows how to behave at the frontier. And, but we, you know, except you got to win. So I give the advice, don't do anything unless you think you're going to win. Which means you should think, of course, you do anything. And so I think a lot. And I still read about 3 to 4 hours a day. So I'm trying to say why I've been successful in my life is generally because I've known more than other people. Not because I'm brighter or I can do things faster. I just know more. So I know what to do next. And so knowledge is unbelievably important. And of course, if you can relate knowledge to ideas, it's even better. But you've got to, you know, what's the next big thing, you know, in curing cancer? It's redox. There's just no doubt about it. It's a simple idea. And then once you have it, you know, then you can't go wrong. So you've got to, you can't talk all the time. You've got to read. You know, Crick would go home at night and he would read. He'd read all the time. So that's why he was, in part, he was just also very bright. But yeah. So, but we were very, you know, we were different people, and we worked together. Then, you know, I'm only happy when I have someone to talk to. You know, in science, so you got to talk to someone. And so when there's no one to talk to at home, you got to leave home.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, for such a detailed answer. So next questions we
I talk too much, but more.
Next question we have upstairs. So the gentleman upstairs.
Yes.
Hello. Hi, Jim. Thank you very much for a very interesting lecture. It was interesting to hear your opinion about redox biology as being the key to curing cancer, and that you think genetic approaches are not very promising. In light of that, I wanted to ask your opinion about the recent announcement, FDA panel approving unanimously genetic therapy for cancer, for lymphomas, leukemia, the chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy. So I just wanted to hear your opinion.
There will be these things. I think they will, if they work, they will cure small segments of cancer, and then in many cases resistance will develop, and the therapy doesn't work. So I like the idea of just being able to kill all cancers by one way. So redox just seems, and these genetic approaches are too expensive. You know, you've got to, so someone was telling me who's the hotshot in England. I forgot his name, but you know, he's a sequencer. And, but the therapy which will come out of it will be restricted to a small segment of cancer related to one mutation. And there are hundreds of mutations which cause cancer. That's the problem. You can cause cancer in so many different ways. But luckily, you can kill cancer cells in one way. So I think it's simpler. But, you know, until we've done it, we haven't done it. So the cancer world doesn't listen to me, I don't listen to them. No, I do know what they're doing, but I don't pay any, you know, it doesn't affect me.
Thank you. So next question we have here.
Good day, Sir Watson. My name is Lyalia Prokopovich, and I am junior scientist of State Scientific Center of Russian Federation, Institute of Medical and Biological Problems of Russian Academy of Sciences, and a candidate to cosmonauts. So I want to ask you a question, because a couple of years ago, when you were in the Presidium of Russian Academy of Sciences, I've asked you to sign, you know, this little card, and your pen has broken. Yes, and do you have a working pen now? Because actually, I've lost mine on the way here.
We've got special, actually, part of today's event after the question devoted to signing everything.
That's pretty cool, but I have a plane to Sevastopol in a couple of hours.
Okay, so
I'm
maybe,
really sorry.
maybe
Pardon me, please.
it's time to do that now, very quickly.
Can I give you a card?
Sure, yeah, sure.
I'm not sure if you've got a pen.
Oh.
Okay, next question, prepare upstairs.
Yes. Yeah, so, yeah.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Ручку вернуть. Next question we have upstairs.
So, you already mentioned a little bit about the political correctness in America. My question is, how much does this culture of political correctness impede scientific progress, and what advice would you have for young scientists that are researching things that could potentially be controversial?
I don't have any good advice for myself, so it's hard to help anyone else. All I can say is, you know, just try and surround yourself with bright men and women. That's all I can say. Just people who, you know, want to do good science, and they still exist. So I think we're in a sort of puritanical phase in the United States. You're not supposed to tell any jokes, and you know, Tim Hunt tried to tell a joke in South Korea, and you know, so I don't have any good advice except no, I don't have any good advice.
Thank you. Thanks. So we have next question here. Представьте.
I didn't hear that.
Actually, the question was, what do you think about CRISPR-Cas technology in general?
Oh, it's the future. So, you know, very great discovery really made by women. There was a man before that. So, you know, I'm just saying it's wonderful science, and, you know, it should get a Nobel Prize exactly. I think you'll find out, you worry about the people before them who, you know, worked on the bacterial systems, which was also very clever. So I don't want to accept they seem to be coming to a decision where there's a universal patent, and so hopefully everyone will just go ahead and use technology and not worry about patents, at least as far as doing science. So, you know, it's big. It's very big. So, you know, and so, yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Thanks. So next question upstairs.
Hello, Mr. Watson. My name is Anton Chugunov. I'm a researcher from this institute, but the question is not from myself, but from a person from Institute of General Genetics who wasn't able to visit this lecture. Rumor had it that once you met President Kennedy and he told that the fact that USA left Russia far behind in biology, this is just because of two people. One of these people is yourself, and another is academician Lysenko, who you mentioned. Is that right? Did Kennedy tell that?
No.
And did you hear this?
No, I never met President John Kennedy. Younger brother Teddy. And Teddy and I almost shared a girlfriend once, so, but, you know, it's a long time ago. And I like the Kennedy, so I don't want to say anything. I'm very pro-Kennedy. But, I mean, the harm of the Lysenko then, you know, just can't be, it was terrible. You know, to try and now, you know, if you read in Turkey, now they're not going to teach evolution in the high schools in Turkey. I mean, just madness, avoiding the truth for religion.
Thanks a lot. So next question here.
Hello, Professor Watson. I am Yuri Nikolaev, senior researcher from the Institute of Microbiology, Russian Academy of Sciences. I have a very specific question. Do you think DNA structure investigation would help to solve antibiotic resistance problem? I mean, superbug problem. Thank you.
No, you know, I have less knowledge about the view, so I can't help you. And so, now, resistance, you know, is it pops up everywhere, and that's been, you know, the problem in cancer therapy, just resistance. And now I think the majority of resistance is due to antioxidants, and it finally comes down to that. And there is a sort of general theory, and but it doesn't pay that for me to say we know the answer to other people. And until we cure cancer, we can't say we've cured it. And all I can say is there is a new drug out there that should be in people, I hope, in a year, and then maybe a little afterwards. We'll know. But if a drug is a really miracle drug, you don't have to test it much. The trouble is now you need all these tests, which mean the drugs are just marginally good. And we have too many marginally good things. And the trouble about a lot of it is that the people, when they get these drugs, they make them sicker, and so it's not clear we're helping the people with cancer by giving them these drugs and prolonging their life. But if I can say anything about medicine, is that medicine is incompatible with capitalism. And capitalism has taken over medicine in a big way in the United States. And that's why it's twice as expensive as any other place. And capitalism is in the process of taking over education. And suddenly the students have all these loans. So capitalism is good for hotels, it may be good for, you know, oil, but it's terrible for education and it's terrible for medicine. And so we're seeing these really important parts of America just being destroyed by capitalism. So, you know, I have two heroes now in life. One is the Pope, so he's the good guy, and the second is Bernie Sanders from Vermont. He claims he's a socialist, and I think socialism is not a bad thing. But America, you know, this takeover of medicine by, you know, the function of medicine was to make people healthy. Now the function of medicine is to make doctors and hospitals rich. So hospitals can pay their heads $10 million. I know these people, they're getting $10 million. They don't need it. But, so it's a disgrace. Our country is a disgrace now in capitalism excess. And, you know, we can't have a Russian revolution or something, but, you know, it's so bad, I think it's better the military to take over than to leave this mess we have. Someone has to restore order to the United States. You know, we don't pay enough taxes, we don't pay anything.
Thanks. Thank you. So we have a question upstairs.
Здравствуйте, Амина Назралиева, психотерапевт Mental Health Center. Люди, которые достигли многого, как правило, очень много работают, они много путешествуют, по своей воле или нет. Так или иначе, как правило, их партнеры остаются в тени довольно часто. Я хотела спросить вас, как вы думаете, каково это быть вашей женой или вашим ребенком? И каков был ваш вклад в отношения, как вы находили время, вообще что вы делали, чтобы ваш брак продлился так долго и был таким успешным?
Did you hear the question? Translation. The question was actually when you are a big person. So how do you think how it is to be your wife or your children? So do they feel themselves like kind of in the shadow, or so? And how it is how to keep it successful? I mean, successful in family.
And what was your part of the commitment, if there was any?
I guess I'm not the person to ask. And tragically, we have one of our sons who's really had serious mental disease since early in life, so he's not the person to ask. My younger son, Duncan, he's come and lived in Russia for a while. He's has a nice wife, he has a nice child. I love him, and he's a good tennis player, so, you know. I don't think he's suffered from my fame. And my wife has written some nice books, and so, you know, I think, have had a good life together. But, you know, I don't think about my fame really at all. All I think about is I don't know how to solve this problem. So I don't think back, you know, you could say, well, I gave this talk, but really, you know, once I've written a book or got it out of my system, then I don't think back. I think, you know, just think forward in your life. I'm lucky, you know, I'm still able to play tennis, so I can look forward to tennis instead of, you know, looking back at tennis or something. So I don't want to live where all I can do is think about my past. I want to think about the future. So we really anticipated being coming to Russia now, so that made our life good. So, you know, and so, you know, I hope I can make this another trip.
Thank you. So I think we have actually, I see 4 people standing, and we will have actually 4 last questions. So 3 from the audience here and 1 from the online translation audience. So let's start with people from here, and then the first question will be about from the audience online.
Hello, Professor Watson. Thank you for your talk. I'm Natalia. I'm a local PhD student. I'm not sure whether you heard about Sci-Hub service. Have you heard about that? Sci-Hub. Okay, I will ask in general. Do you think that scientists have to pay for their articles, or they should be open access?
So there is one popular resource in Russia, in Kazakhstan, in China.
In Iraq.
So actually it's a kind of pirate resource where all the scientific articles are deposited for free. And what do you think this copyright problem, so
well, I think
do you think it is good or it is bad?
Yeah.
You know, the bad.
I think some super rich person should give enough money so all textbooks are just free. You know, that I thought at Cold Spring Harbor, we just pay someone to write a book, and then afterwards there's no royalties, we put it on free. Maybe it's only on the web. If you want to have a copy of the book, then you pay a small amount. But I think nowadays we should just move for making it free. That's, and you know, these textbooks which cost $200, so you not only even own your textbook, you rent it, and then capitalism in the United States is really vicious.
Thank you.
That's all I can say.
Thank you. So next question, please.
Professor Watson, I'm Natalia. I have just graduated, so I received my master's diploma in Lomonosov Moscow State University. And I just would like to know, what is your way to ask yourself questions? You've mentioned that you know a lot of information because you read a lot of books, and after that you have some ideas what to do next. How are these ideas coming to your head? I mean, how are they born there? This is, and
no, I think it's just important that, you know, universities be very open places, and certainly, you know, in Cold Spring Harbor, we've been very open. If people really want to be with us, we let them, but, you know, you have to, it just depends on having a large number of, you know, good sites of learning, not just, you know, Russia, it's got to be in many places, not just in Moscow or in the United States. It can't be restricted to Berkeley or something, it has to be broad. And right now, I don't, it's partly my age. I don't see enough bright young people now. You know, everyone seems concerned with making money. I'm not interested in people who want to make money. You know, I'm interested in people who want to have ideas. So that's my world.
Okay.
And,
okay, thank you very much.
thank you. Yeah, sure. And but I mean, all one can do is hope you're. You know, this is a wonderful building for doing science. Just filled with good people doing science, and you know, I hope your leader Putin realizes how important it is for Russians to think. They have to think in order to be first. So we've got to encourage bright people, and now in the United States, it seems that we encourage everyone, and I'm very selfish. I'm only interested in the top 1% of people. You know, that's where I bet. I just want to see more people. Maybe it's 2%. I'd love it to be 2% or whatever it is. But you know, just to because these problems are hard. The brain is a very hard problem to work on. So it's not as if you want everyone to work on it when, in fact, you have to have something up here to start with. So, you know, I'm not supposed to say it, but the truth is, finding the truth is hard. And everyone's not equal. That's one of the reasons I'm in problems in the United States. I see people are different. And, you know, but I just think, just follow the truth. That's all I can say. If you follow the truth, you get into trouble, but not as much trouble if you don't follow the truth. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
Okay, the guy before me here just would like to ask what is the main publication in your new field? The most important publication.
In your new field of studies, what is the main publication? If any.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. The important publication is a drug which cures most cancers. We don't have it. When we have it, then I'll be happy.
Thanks. So, next question.
Hello, James Watson. My name is Mirsha Artur. I am a doctor, child oncologist, and I was reading about your work about antioxidants. It's very interesting. And my question about what you think about baking soda in treatment cancer oncology. Я хочу услышать просто мнение великого ученого.
Baking soda to treat oncology. I'm not sure if you've heard about that.
No, I haven't heard about it. And look, if it works, it's great. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Thanks. So, okay, so we have a last question from the audience and then from the online.
Hello, Professor Watson. I am Marina in Moscow Pedagogical State University, and my question: how books, какие книги сформировали ваше мировоззрение?
What are those books that formed your mind, the most inspirational for you?
They tended to be novels, you know, which sort of described lives I was interested in. So I love reading novels. Now I tend to read more history, or, you know, I don't read novels anymore. But when I was young, I wanted to sort of experience new worlds, and I did it through reading novels. When I was, you know, say 17 or 18, I learned Turgenev very much. So, you know, and then when I was in England, I liked Evil and Law, and, you know, and then, you know, I enjoyed laughing, so Kingsley Amis was fun, and so, now I'm lucky enough is, you know, that my main excitement doesn't, I mean, it's not novels, but just reading interesting people. Because, you know, when I was reading novels, I was in a very dull world. Or I wasn't meeting people. And so novels fill in a necessary thing before you get out into the world. Right now I read an awful lot of, actually, reviews of books. I spend a lot of time reading the New York Review of Books, the London Review of Books, because then I get their main message and so on. So I'm, you know, probably spend an hour a day reading magazines at least. So I probably spend more time reading than talking or listening.
Thanks. So, and we have a last question upstairs from the online audience. So we have online translation and people just have questions. Yeah, you are.
Добрый день, меня зовут Залевский Артур, я из факультета инженерии и биоинформатики МГУ, а также проект Future Biotech Live. Наши онлайн-зрители очень интересуются, какую книгу вы можете посоветовать прочитать, современную книгу, человеку, который считает себя достойным человеком, увлекается наукой. Какую-нибудь одну книгу.
There's a book called On Intelligence by Jeffrey Hawkins. It came out 10 years ago. I don't know of something more recent which really deals with how the brain works. But, you know, if I was a young person, I just want to read books on how the brain works.
Спасибо.
Thank you so much. Let's thank again James Watson for this nice evening. Thank you very much. So, я теперь скажу, как у нас будет организована дальнейшая часть. Сейчас те, кто... Я теперь скажу, как у нас будет организована дальнейшая часть.